let's talk about how to prepare for a final interview. What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Real English here with another video to help you get hired. Today we're going to be talking about final interviews or partner interviews. This question actually came up when I sent an email out to our subscribers, and I said send me some questions about stuff that you'd like to know the answers to. And one of the questions that came in was actually super interesting. What was asked was basically, how do I prepare for a final interview and how is that different from a first round interview? So I want to go through some similarities and differences and also my experience of preparing candidates for partner interviews for almost 10 years now, since 2013. Now when I first started preparing clients, when I started coaching in sort of like my mid-20s, partner interviews were a pretty big deal. They'd generally be for an hour, they'd include some form of presentation most of the time, and you would almost always meet with a partner or with a director. Now times have changed. Partner interviews these days, or final interviews, tend to be much shorter. Definitely for big companies, they tend to sort of be squidged in to an assessment centre. This copies the style that a lot of companies use in Asia because they process a lot more people in what we call super days. So you'll have an assessment centre and a final interview all in the same day. Sometimes, you know, people are cut off as you move through the day in an assessment centre, so only the candidates who are successful actually make it to the final interview, but that's not always the case. So first of all, how are they the same? Well, it's an interview, so you can almost definitely expect they're probably going to ask you like, why do you want to work for this company? Why do you want to work for this role? They're probably going to give you some competency questions, maybe not as many, and you want to make sure that you've got really good examples prepared. You also want to make sure that you've got good questions prepared. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in the differences, but questions that I really love to ask interviewers are really just growth questions. So what can I learn while I'm waiting to see if I'm successful to help me to be better at this job? What have you learned at this company that you think is really valuable to share? What's the biggest mistake that you've made? What's the biggest challenge that you faced? What's the biggest challenge that's facing the company or the industry right now? These are open-ended questions. I don't really like questions which are really arbitrary, like when am I going to hear back? How much will I get paid? The differences really come down to the fact that you have to remember the person sitting in front of you for a final interview is probably the one who's going to make the decision. Yes, of course, you're going to have somebody who's in human resources or the original person who's interviewed you who's going to have some sort of say in that, but that person who's sitting there in front of you is really the decision maker. So let's talk about crucial differences in the way to think about how to prepare for the interview. Number one, if you've reached the final interview, you're already good enough to do the job. Actually, that's the case for assessment centres. And if you want to see 17 tips about how to pass assessment centres, check out the card up in the right hand corner. When you get to an assessment centre or a final interview, technically you are good enough. Now really what people are looking for is, are you a good culture fit? Now what does this mean whenever people say culture fit? Basically, do we like you? Can you get on with other members of the team? Now I've met many people who are really talented and on paper are technically quite brilliant, but actually they're really bad as part of a team. Maybe they're arrogant, dismissive, they've got poor social skills, they're just really not a good team player. So people kind of get weeded out because they think, well, you're not really going to get on with the team because they're quite bubbly or they're quite introverted or so on and so forth. So that's something to think about. The next difference to think about is a partner, a director, an owner. So for example, whenever I've interviewed people at the different companies that I've run, generally when somebody sits down for an interview with me, it's like the last stage. So I don't have a lot of time. Really what I want to do is I want to get a really quick measure of them. So I might say like, why do you want to work here? Why do you want to do this job? What do you think you'd be doing? And I might throw out one or two competency questions that I think are relevant to the job that they're going to be doing. Like, have they got a really crucial skill? You know, for example, if it's a salesperson, I might say, tell me how to sell this pen. Like, how would you sell this pen to me? But really quickly, you'd know if an interview is going well with me because I'm going to start having a conversation with you. I might talk about, what you do in your spare time, what you did in your job before, something that I find interesting about you. So as soon as you feel that the interview is becoming a bit more conversational, you can generally sort of unclench and relax a little bit. Another thing that I found, which I've seen a lot of candidates get caught out on in a partner or final interview, is a level of commercial awareness. So these are people who are heavily involved in the industry, and they're going to sort of want to ask you about, what's a recent piece of business news, what's a big challenge that we're facing, what's something that you've read recently that you find interesting, what's a recent skill that you've learned. they're going to want to see some element of a growth mindset. And I've seen plenty of people go into interviews for banks, professional services companies, asset management, private equity. They don't really know about the industry, and something that someone who's on the inside of that knows is that unless you're really passionate about it and it's something that you engage with in your spare time, this isn't really going to be the job for you. You're probably just attracted by the power, the money, the prestige, but we want people who are really interested in it, and basically it's something that you do in your spare time anyway, so you should expect that. The final difference, and I think this is quite crucial, is this is potentially a person who you may not see or get to spend any significant time with again, because partners, directors and owners bill a huge hourly rate, and really all they're interested in is going out and selling or closing clients, or working on the business to make sure that the business goes and enacting business strategy. So this is a really great opportunity to learn. One thing, a question that always really stuck out to me was a couple of years ago we were interviewing for a new salesperson, and she turned around to me and she said, "Oh, what are your plans for the business for the next 3 years?" And I love that question. It really stuck out to me because I really had to sit there and think, and I said, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and I'm thinking about this. And she just sat there and she listened, but she showed a keen interest in the business and where it was going and what we were doing. So I think that's something to really recognise. So in summary, partner interviews, final interviews tend to be a little bit more developed or advanced. Of course, if it's technical, it may be more technical, less technical. It could be more just talking about things, talking about projects. One thing to definitely bear in mind is that if your interviewer is already talking to you about the type of work that you're going to be doing, it's generally a good sign. What I tend to find is I've done quite a lot of final interviews and prepared clients for hundreds of final interviews. Generally, if that person is switching off, then they'll kind of bring the interview to a close pretty quickly, or they'll just ask you some standard questions and be like, okay, thanks very much, see you later, because they're like, right, I've got to get to my next appointment. So how do you go about preparing for partner interviews? Number one, you want your answers and your star stories. If you don't know how to answer star stories, then check out our 20 to 28 most common interview questions answered ebook in the store, in the link in the description below, where we outline how to do that. You want your examples down cold. You want to be really clear and concise, bearing in mind you're sitting in front of somebody who's already busy and is already probably thinking about the next thing that they have to do, or all the stuff that they have to do in that day. So you want to be able to get to the point. Any element of kind of dithering or shyness, or just sort of like, oh, I'm not really sure, I'm so sorry, it's just going to be greeted with like, oh, that's fine, but it's just like, oh my god, get me out of here, I need to get on to the next thing that I need to do. Definitely make sure that you've got some awareness around the business. I think it's good to know what the business is doing. Can you read their projects, their blogs? Can you read about the industry? Show that you have a keen interest, and go prepared with some really good questions, because I think the more senior that somebody is, the less used to being asked questions they are. That's certainly my experience. So my mentors, my friends, many of whom are owners and who own and run up to sort of 9-figure businesses, I ask them a crap ton of questions. Whenever I see them, I always enjoy spending time with them, and how did you do this? What is this about? What made you make this decision? Why did you hire this person? Why did you fire that person? And I find that actually they really quite enjoy it. Well, I hope that they do, because they're not really used to having to explain themselves or explain their logic, but this is a really great opportunity to learn. So if you are preparing for a final interview, got one coming up, or just curious, let us know how we did. Drop us a comment down below. Let us know any other videos you'd like us to make. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I wish you the best of luck. See you later.